Welcome everyone to Woolfer Live. I'm Hilary Richard, and today I'm interviewing a fabulous novelist and a dear friend, Joanna Hershon. Hi, Joanna.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. Joanna has a new novel out from Farrar. It's called Saint Ivo. It came out, I think, on April 14th, and
Mhm.
it's fabulous. She got a very well-deserved, really beautiful, actually, review in the New York Times that referred to her book as fiction full of complexity devoted to reality, which I thought was really pretty apt. You must be pretty thrilled about that review,
I
Joanna.
love this review. I love it.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
really, to be honest, I wept when I read it. It was that,
Wow,
yeah,
I just got
I
chills.
wept, like not just cried, like it was this feeling of, you know, so a reviewer really understanding what I was trying to do, really.
That's how it read to me. Like, I don't know what you were trying to do, but I felt like it was a reviewer who really understood the book.
Yes,
And the thing that resonated certainly for me with the book, because I read it before it was published, I read it in galleys
early
and we
reader.
reviewed
Yeah.
it for the Woolfer and loved it. Um, and it's one of those reviews that makes you want to read the book. You know how that happens
Yeah.
sometimes?
Yeah, I
Sometimes
just
the
was
review is
so
so good.
I was so impressed with her writing and her level of engagement with the actual book. I feel like sometimes reviewers are really sort of writing more like they have an idea and they want to put it out there as opposed to really engaging with the book. And what
Right, or they're
it's like,
reciting the sort of factual, the
yes,
narrative, if you
yeah,
will, of the book. So I want to talk to you a little bit about something I wouldn't ordinarily ask an author because I just something I don't think about often, and it's cover art, which is sort of a crazy question, I guess, to ask a novelist. But I feel like most cover art is really representational. So if you look at Jenny Ofil's Weather, it has clouds, right?
hmm,
Most copies of To the Lighthouse have a lighthouse.
that's true. Yeah.
And and of course it makes sense. What's the book about? Your book, your cover art is representational in that it's the park, and there's a very important scene that takes
Mhm.
place at the beginning of the book in the park. But the thing that's different is there's like an ominous quality, like a haunting, dark,
Mhm.
sort of visceral, emotional response that I got from your cover art, which is I've never experienced that before. I don't think that I can recall. Did you have a hand in selecting it?
So they showed me the cover and everyone at FSG was very excited about the cover and I had a very strong positive reaction. It was the only cover they showed me and I just think it's absolutely perfect. Like I felt
It
about the
really,
cover the way I felt about the review. It's like that's it. And there are so many reasons why I think it's perfect. I actually wrote, I don't, the designer, I wanted to know who designed it because I wanted to write to the person and
mhm.
just tell them how extraordinary I think it is. So I did. I don't know. It was forwarded on, I presume, but I just think that it's actually three photographs, layers. It's like
Really.
layers. Like you look at it and it looks like one thing, and then it keeps going. So I think that's really amazing.
That's incredible because for me, it was really, I really did have an emotional response to it, and
So cool.
I couldn't think of that having happened before. So I was curious how that worked. So Joanna, you wrote a piece in Granta called Saint Ivo that was published, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. How long ago was it?
I think it was. I think it was 2 years ago, 3 years.
Yeah, that's, I think it was 2 years ago
Offhand,
as
I'm not
well.
sure, but yeah.
And I loved it, as you know, and I have been literally on the edge of my seat. Okay, not literally, figuratively on the edge of my seat ever since, waiting for your book to be finished and published. And there's some, I mean, it appears to me that the story was really the starting point for the novel. Is that accurate?
Definitely. Yes, definitely. For me, the process of writing this novel and how it came to be is actually very interesting to me. Like, I
Well,
don't
I
know,
want to hear it.
you know, just how it all happened. I mean, I'm not someone who's ever written anything based on something else I've written or any sequel or anything like that. It's
Right.
everything's completely contained and discreet. So
And different. Yeah.
and different, yeah. And so basically, all right, I'm going to try to make this as concise as possible. But basically, after my last book was published, which was called A Dual Inheritance, and that came out in 2013, I had, I just really didn't know what to write next. And I was in a very kind of, which isn't unusual for me. Usually I don't know what to write next, and then something kicks in and starts
Yeah.
it. So, but I really was a bit lost as to what was next. And I had this experience that happened on the subway, and which is basically
Plot point for the book.
which is how the whole thing started. And so I had this experience, and it wasn't the kind of experience that if I told you what happened, it would have been crazily dramatic. But
Right.
it was a real moment for me, and this is very unusual for me. It happened, and as soon as it happened, I thought, this is the opening of something. And it felt like an opening for a thriller. And I've
Uh-huh.
never written a thriller before. And I wrote down what happened, which again is very unusual for me. I don't really take notes in my life so
Mhm.
much. I wrote it down, and then I started doing all this research. I thought that I was going to write, I thought I was going to write a more kind of traditional thriller, literary thriller. And I did all this research, and then I just couldn't find my
Mhm.
way into it. And then I had a lot going on in my domestic life. I got pregnant, I had a baby, and I just sort of said, you know what, I'm going to put everything aside right now. I'm just going to focus on what's going on with my house and with my
Right.
kids. And then when my daughter was 6 months old, I rejoined my writer space.
Got tired of talking about baby poop and
Yeah, I went in, but I went in and I was, it was 6 months out from giving
yeah.
birth, and I was breastfeeding, and I was exhausted. And I went in and I just told myself, okay, you're just going to not think about plot. You're not going to think about craft, anything that I would think about in starting a novel. And I just made myself kind of like free write, like the way I did
Wow.
when I was a teenager.
Uh-huh.
And I ended up, the whole process was so interesting to me, because you'd think first of all, it almost felt like, I keep saying that, like tarot cards, even though I'm not a tarot reader. It felt like that kind of imagistic, like an image would come to me, and then I would just write into it, and I would refuse to allow myself to stop and think. I just wrote.
Right.
And so it would be really just digressive and kind of all over the place. And you think that would just end up being kind of meandering, but very, very quickly, it ended up becoming a short story, and ended up
Uh,
like taking on this very distinct structure. And then I wrote that short story. And then I, started to send it to my agent, try to get it published, but I couldn't let it go. There was something deeper at play for me. And then my husband actually said, maybe you're thinking about this slightly differently. And, you
mhm.
don't really read thrillers. That's not what you don't read them. Maybe, what you're really good at is writing suspenseful scenes between people. And, and so then I started thinking about this other idea I had,
Mhm.
which really is based on some time I spent in upstate New York. And then these two stories just kind of fit together somehow. So
So, what's interesting to me is that you say that this was a very different process for you than
yeah.
you ordinarily undergo when you're writing a book. I'm a huge fan of your writing, and I've read all your novels, and you're a beautiful writer. But this book, it seems to me, is very different.
Mm,
Right? Swimming, The German Bride, The Outside of August, A Dual Inheritance. They're more sprawling,
they are.
both in sort of time and scope and geography, it seemed to me.
Hmm.
And, this book is so tight, confined really to basically a weekend. And it doesn't have sort of the attention or sort of emphasis that you've placed in some of your other books on the exterior.
Mhm.
right? The place. I mean, some your books seem very well researched, and very beautifully describe location and and atmosphere. And this book is so interior. I mean, I loved it. It's huge in terms of the interior lives,
Mhm.
and sort of tiny in
Mhm.
the exterior lives. So do you feel like this is a real departure from your previous novels, or sort of a continuation? How would you describe it?
Well, you know what I think was really a departure for me, was when I wrote the short story. I never write in not never, but I almost never write in first person. And
Mhm,
when I wrote the short story, which came from that place that I'm talking about, where I was exhausted and just kind of
mhm.
free writing. So that was in for the short story is in first person. And I think maybe there was something about that initial spark and that first person um in intimacy or something, that
Mhm.
even though the book is not in first person, maybe something happened where I don't know. There's something about I don't entirely feel like it's a total departure. I feel like if actually what's interesting to me is if you go back, and I certainly wasn't thinking this until I don't know when it occurred to me, but my first novel, which I started when I was
Living.
barely out of college,
Yeah.
um, the beginning of the book is a weekend, and then it goes
Yeah.
10 years in the future. And it's almost as if there's some imprint in me about like the weekend in the country. And there's something there, like my youngest self and my and this part of sort of middle
Yeah.
age self, like something clicking in. So I
Well,
don't
there are
know.
definitely, I'm sorry, there are definitely themes like, marriage and family, and, you know, that run throughout all of your books.
Yeah,
But this one, I don't know. This one, I
yeah.
think, is going to have a special place in my heart.
Thank you.
So your publisher, I just want to read the blurb, part of the publisher's blurb, because
Mhm.
this is a topic that's just so interesting to me. So, among other things, and all these laudatory, well-deserved things, the blurb says, "Unwinding like a suspense novel, Joanna Hershon St. Ivo is a powerful investigation into the meaning of choice and family, whether we ever know the people closest to us." And I have to tell you that this is a topic that I'm sort of fascinated by, this idea of like how well we know someone, even though we live with them and, you know, are intimate with them and
Yeah.
share the quotidian, minutia of life and the big stuff, deaths and marriages and whatever. And Nina and I sometimes argue about this. I feel like we all have secrets, even if
Mhm.
we're like I am, and she is like, I'm an open book, ask me anything, I'll tell you about anything. It drives my kids crazy because often I'll tell you about them, and they're like, Mom, but still, I've been married for almost 30 years. I feel like there are definitely things I don't tell my husband, and I don't know exactly why.
Mhm.
So do you have any insight into this? Are we trying to keep some little part of ourselves a mystery? What are we doing here?
Yeah, I'm completely fascinated by that as well. I definitely think it's throughout my books. Certain this book for sure.
Absolutely. And I would say others, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, and it's something that I think about a lot, just in terms of like, it's very interesting to think, to remind oneself that your partner actually is mysterious. Like I'm sure there are people who inherently have great mystery in their
Right.
quotidian lives. I don't. I feel like I'm very close to my husband. I feel very intimate, but I still feel like and maybe this is just also like, I definitely feel like we're not from the same planet. Like we're like we are different. Like we're so aligned, but like there's a difference. And I feel like that difference, sometimes I think, well, that's kind of what keeps us, there's
Some
um
some
something
frisson.
exciting there, something
Yeah.
like, and it's because we are different beings. And I think that it's important to remember that in relationships, not just with your, with the partner or romantic relationship. With friends too, I feel like, sometimes you sort of take your friends' taste for granted, or what
Yeah.
they have to offer you as a friend even. And I don't know, people are always surprising me. And
I love that. I feel like I mean, that's sort of what keeps life interesting. I don't know if I was surprised my husband. I know that, not unlike you two, obviously we're different, right? We
mhm,
were raised very differently. We had very different uh, childhoods, just different, different interests, different professions. It's
mhm.
not like we're both even in the arts
Yeah, no,
or,
you're very
we're
different.
two
Yeah.
lawyers. So, we have different ways of looking at things and thinking of things. And I think sometimes he's just like, and other times he's like, wow, it's nice that she's so not me. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
definitely. I
Yeah.
think
But
that, yeah, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, but now I have to wonder because I'm so often just thinking about myself. What secrets is he keeping?
Yeah. I mean, I think that people write, for different reasons and are drawn toward writing fiction for different reasons. I would say that, to me, when I was speaking about, thinking about friends and
Hmm.
just people in general and what they have inside them that maybe we don't understand or quite recognize. I think that's why reading fiction is it's so personal. I feel like
Yeah.
there's nothing like that almost that I know of still. And I feel like even my friends who I know their taste, I know that what they're gonna love, and same with my husband.
Hmm.
Like, I just feel like books are so personal. They're so
Yeah.
intimate. And I feel like someone can finish a book and have like waves of emotion, or then be like, it was all right. What was,
I'm
you know,
shocked when
and
people don't like the books I like.
I know,
Shocked.
I know it's shocking because you feel like, wait, I had this whole experience and I thought you would have that experience. And it's very intimate.
So, the sort of core tension in both the story and the novel is the absence of the protagonist's daughter. I'm
Mhm,
not revealing anything that isn't pretty immediately revealed in the novel or in the review. So
mhm.
uh, I'm not spoiling it. You just have to read it.
Be careful with this book with the spoilers, though.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anymore. But the thing that about that, and certainly as a mother of three girls, is it's so inconceivable and relatable at the same time, making it terrifying. And did that aspect of the story, did that come from sort of just your natural? I think every mother fears losing a
Yeah,
child to
yeah.
violence, to drugs, to something else, whatever. Is that because
I
obviously
think
that's
that
not
this
what
really, I think,
inspired the story.
yeah, I think this book really, I mean, I've reflected upon it a lot. I think it really started and sustained itself as kind of it's like almost like a fever dream.
Uh,
Like this kind of fear and very primal. And I think that's also what you're sensing, like something that's different about my books. I feel like I
yeah.
started this book out of a very primal state, um,
Which is
out of
not
certain
uncommon when
states
you
in
have a
life.
baby.
What's
When you
that?
have, it's not uncommon when you have a little baby
Not uncommon.
to feel that way.
No. And I didn't have postpartum. I wasn't in a fragile place emotionally when more than, I mean,
Right.
I wasn't suffering or struggling to kind of like get through the day or anything like that. I was in a good place. But both
Yeah.
times that I've given birth, I've actually had this kind of burst of almost euphoria, I guess. Like,
Okay, come on, stop it. You're
I
nice,
did.
beautiful, you're a
I was
great
like,
writer. You can't also be ecstatic after pregnancy. It's
I was
not
like,
fair.
I was also exhausted and freaked out. But I mean, I definitely at like 6 months, also the last time, because I think
Huh.
it's that thing of like, oh, I can leave and I can do stuff. I don't know. And then I'm so in love with this
Oh,
baby.
yeah.
I don't know. It's sort of that's I don't know. So I wasn't
Well, they
like,
seem so fragile at that stage
no,
in such a
I
good
wasn't like,
way.
struggling and depressed or anything, but I do feel like I was carrying around a lot of anxiety and kind of untapped fear and yeah, and
That is the
it's great
undertone.
into
That
your
is the
writing.
undertone of this book, which
Yeah.
I love, and it's such a gripping. It's such a beautiful story that I just need everyone to buy Joanna's book and read it for themselves, so you can enjoy it as much as I did, and I know Nina loved it, and come on, in the New York Times, that's not nothing.
No.
I feel like I should make the obligatory question of what are you working on or what's next. But you've already told me that after you write a book,
I'm not
you don't
working.
really
You
know
know
what
what
you're doing next.
I'm working on keeping it together. And I'm
Yeah,
working on cooking and cleaning.
yeah,
And I have a 5-year-old now. So
yeah,
in addition to teenage twins. So I'm busy.
yeah,
So, but
yeah.
hopefully this time will, I don't know, birth some new
Maybe the next time,
anxiety. And then
maybe
it'll
the next time you get on the subway. So everyone should
hopefully
buy
write
Joanna's
something.
book. Now, obviously you can buy it on Amazon, but we want to encourage you to buy it from your independent local bookseller. So for example, our local bookseller is Books for Magic. You can go on their website. They've got it. I checked. Presumably, if you live somewhere else, you have an independent bookstore too. So go out and get the book. It's beautiful
Thank
and you won't
you.
regret it. And Joanna, thanks so much for joining us. Really
Thank
happy to
you
have
so
you.
much. May I just say bookshop.org is a
Yeah. Oh,
really
yeah.
amazing option too. If you're
Now,
in,
is that the aggregation of independent booksellers?
yeah, and I think you end up donating like, a very small percentage to independent booksellers. So it
Okay.
aggregate like an Amazon option because it ships and you just type in your zip code, I think,
Uh-huh.
and then it takes you whatever local independent bookstore
So bookshop.com,
.org.
.org,
Mhm.
bookshop.org,
Yeah, it's a good option
people.
if you're not
Okay. Thanks,
sure.
Joanna. I look
Thank
forward
you
to the
so
next time I
much
can
for
see you in
having
real life.
me. What's
It
that?
was a pleasure.
Such a
Pleasure.
pleasure.